Good morning. Hi, it's me, your Fed Phoenix. um, so today I want to make a video about RDAP. This is an acronym. It stands for Residential Drug Abuse Program. As a person heading into federal prison, or as a person likely to go to federal prison, this program is something very important that you need to be aware of. And not being aware of this program could actually cost you more time than necessary in prison. So, definitely take a listen here. So, what is RDAP? RDAP is a program. There were laws passed for this. There are supposed to be like all these programs and a lot of programs in federal prison that for every like 3 days of participation, that you voluntarily do and have no problems with, that you would get like a day off your sentence. And of course, this capped at a certain point. You can only get up to so many, days a year off or whatever. But it was a way because in the federal system, there is no 75%. There is no 50%. There is no shock release at 25%. A lot of these early releases that people get in state prisons just don't exist in the federal system. And people tend to get larger sentences, from what I've seen, in the federal system than in state, disproportionately larger, quite frankly. And so to help chip away at the time that people in federal prison are getting, there's supposed to be ways that you can kind of earn, good behavior time out. Well, unfortunately, the only widespread, commonly available program to do this, the only one, and you heard that correctly, is called RDAP. And first off, how RDAP works as an overview is if you go to prison, federal prison, and you apply to take RDAP, and you successfully complete RDAP, which is a 9-month program, as far as the in-house aspect. Sorry, I just need me some coffee. It's early. But then what you get in exchange for that is a year off your sentence, just a year knocked off your sentence, an additional 6 months halfway house time. Now, you may be wondering, why would you want to spend extra time in the halfway house, right? Well, in the federal system, a day in the halfway house is considered a day in prison. I know in some state systems, halfway house is kind of after your prison time, you know what I mean, as a transitional thing on your way home, or the very, whatever. But, in the Fed, your halfway house time counts as prison time. So 6 months in the halfway house counts the same as 6 months in prison. So getting additional halfway house time is not getting additional time. Getting additional halfway house time is being allowed to do a larger sum of your prison sentence in a halfway house instead of in a prison. And, the idea behind this is because in the halfway house, you can work, you can, set up your bank account, get your driver's license back. Most of them will allow you to have a car. Pretty much all of them will allow you to have a cell phone with different roles. The idea of your halfway house time is really to give you an opportunity to transition from being incarcerated back into the free world, and to kind of ease that transition as much as possible, rather than you just going from prison to just straight out into the free world. Because, and a lot of people kind of have nowhere to go. So after the halfway house, it's a homeless shelter. It's some random pen pal's house they met while they were incarcerated. So the halfway house also gives you, it's not like, prison, figure it out, because you can't even get released from federal prison without a home plan. Now, granted, I've heard some people's home plans being like homeless shelters, where, you got to submit where you're going to go when you leave. They have to go check the place out, make sure that it's up to their guidelines for you to even live there before you can even get released from prison. So this kind of also creates a time buffer for you to also figure out where the heck you're about to go if you don't already own a home somewhere that's livable, or, have arrangements already made. And it's better for you, the halfway house time. I mean, obviously, in the halfway house, there's no barbed wire fence, there's no gun tower. In the halfway house, like I said, you can, a lot of them will let you have a car if you have a car in your name, park it on premises. You can work and get a car. So that's the benefit to RDAP is a year off your sentence and 6 months extra halfway house, which essentially boils down to a year and a half less that you spend in prison. Now, if you're a person that has, let's say, I don't know, a 10-year sentence and you do RDAP, it's going to take a year off and it's going to give you an extra 6 months halfway house. The feds give you 54 days a year good behavior. Now, what's crazy about that, as far as good behavior time reduction. So a lot of people say 85%, but technically it's 87% with good behavior that you would do in the Fed. But the crazy thing about that is let's say you went into prison and federal prison in 2020 and you get out, and you're doing however many years. In 2021, 2025, the good behavior time you earned in previous years. So let's say the good behavior time you earned this year. So you got 54 days off your sentence for your good behavior this year. Well, 5 years from now, if you get in trouble, they can take that back. Yeah, what you earned and was given years ago, they can renege on it. They can go say, oh, yep, you got that good behavior time in 2021. It's 2025, but we need more stuff to punish you with, so we're going to take that away. That's, it's not adding 54 days to your sentence, technically, it's just taking away the 54 days off you got. So, but with RDAP, it's generally not going to happen that with RDAP that you really have to worry about potentially losing the time off that you earned through doing RDAP or the additional halfway house time you earned through doing RDAP, which is nice too. I'm sorry, it is so early, and I've just been so busy lately. So I'm trying to focus here, and I want to make sure I give you guys all the information you actually need. Now, you may be thinking, as a person who's about to go to federal prison or a person whose loved one is about to go to federal prison, well, heck, sign us up. RDAP sounds great. And I think most federal defendants prefer to do RDAP if possible. Here's the thing. Is you have to actually be accepted into the RDAP program. When you go to prison, they're going to have some paperwork to fill out, to kind of apply to go into the RDAP program. And then there'll be a panel of people who look over your paperwork that will determine if you do or do not qualify. Now, here's where you're going to get a lot of people get kind of jammed up. Is let's say you're a person who, this may seem a bit stereotypical, but let's say you're a white-collar defendant and, every weekend, you get, just let, lots of bourbon until you pass out and, throw up on yourself in the Maserati. Or, or let's say you're a regular blue-collar defendant and you're, one of these younger-minded people who, are out here, doing all the party drugs, popping pills, taking Molly, drinking lean, but you're a person who gets pretty heavily intoxicated, several days a week. Now, I'm sure you're not doing that consciously, like, oh, life is horrible, I want to get lit. Nah. You probably in your mind before you got hemmed up, indicted, or whatever, life was great. This was a thing you did socially. But, you really want to do a lot of introspect. And you want to really ask yourself, is there any way, shape, or form that you had a dependency of some sort, even if it was a social dependency, on these substances? Because here's the thing, is you can't get into RDAP if you don't have a drug abuse problem. Now, you don't have to be a full-on addict. You don't have to be the stereotypical, or say that you were the stereotypical person who's out here, stealing and doing really freaky stuff for a couple pennies, or, whatever it is, robbing old ladies, whatever it is that people in addiction do. Addiction in the sense of what myself and most people probably kind of stereotype the image in our head of who is a drug addict. There are a lot of people that are functioning drug addicts. And by the way, I meant no offense to those who have been, at the bottoms of the belly of the beast in addiction. I'm not, that's not for me to judge or really, whatever. But there are a lot of functioning addicts. There are a lot of functioning alcoholics. There are a lot of people who, Some people even prescribe medication that they abuse. There's a lot of, you really want to really kind of broad spectrum, think of the term addict and alcoholic, and see if it has any possible application to you. Because without that, you can't get into RDAP. So now, if it really has absolutely nothing to you, and you're not a person who is a social drinker and that gets a little excessive, you're not a person who, oh, it feels so weird to even say that, but you're not a person who does coke on the weekends with your friends, or if none of these things really apply to you, if you're a person who's only abused substance in your life at any point has been like caffeine or sugar, then this you wouldn't apply. You wouldn't qualify for RDAP, particularly if that's what you're saying to them, because you're telling them you don't qualify for RDAP, and I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying exaggerate. For me to tell you those things would probably be a criminal offense, and I'm not interested in getting more charges. But yeah, so you need to really ask yourself, how, because if at all possible that you fit into the mold of addict or alcoholic. And the thing too is they want, part of the requirements for RDAP is you had to have been abusing substances within a year of the date you get sentenced, which is tricky because, some people sit in county and state jails or county jails for years prior to being sentenced. But you have to have, abused substances within a year of your sentencing date, even if you spent that time in the county, which is kind of crazy and tricky. And you got to be a person who was under the influence of substance abuse during the commission of your crimes, or if your crimes spanned over, a longer period of time, throughout the, off and on throughout the commission of your crimes. Now, what you can do, because I know you're probably thinking, ugh, I might qualify for RDAP, but this is going to be tight trying to get in there. What you can do to help yourself with this process is when you have your PSR, they will ask you very specifically about your substance abuse history, and you want to be as in detail as possible. You want to be as thorough as possible. You want any substance abuse history you have well documented in your PSR. If you write and submit a personal narrative, you want to greatly mention that as well. And if your lawyer submits a sentencing memorandum prior to your sentencing, you want to make sure that he mentions that. And you want to make sure that that at the end of your sentencing memorandum, where he gives what is your plan for reentry into society, that that he mentions in there that you intend to do RDAP while incarcerated. And you want at sentencing for your lawyer, when at sentencing, when you get to the very end and the prosecutor's saying the worst he can about you and your lawyer's saying the best, and then you give allocution, when it's your lawyer's turn in that rotation, you want him to specifically request that you go, that the judge recommends you do RDAP. If you happen to be on pre-sentence release right now and you're free, like I am, you want to go to NA meetings, AA meetings, maybe some outpatient drug counseling. If you actually have been to these kind of places before, you've been to rehabs and stuff, you might want to go ahead and try to get documentation of that now while you're in the free world, and that's fairly easy to get. You want to get documentation of anything like that. And what I would do if I was you is I would make 2 copies. One, a couple days before I'm actually going to prison, to mail yourself in prison, to give your counselor in prison, your caseworker, to help you get into RDAP. And one to leave with a loved one, your point of contact person, which I have a lot of videos discussing and explaining, what a point of contact person is, why you need one and such. But have a copy with them as well. So if for some reason you don't get the copy you're sending yourself, a copy can be sent directly into the RDAP people at the prison to get your butt into RDAP. But you want documentation is everything. I mean, it's the government, I don't know if you've ever had a government job and gotten hurt, or if you've ever, applied for disability or have a loved one who has. Everything with the government is paperwork, paperwork, paperwork. Same with the military. My father's military. Everything is just mountains of paperwork. So what you want to do now, while you're in the free board and you have access to it, is you want to gather any pre-existing paperwork to show that you should qualify for the RDAP program. And you also want to kind of build up the paperwork, especially if there's no pre-existing. Now, I know with the NA and AA, I believe now you can do it through Zoom, which is all electronic, and I think you'll get an email confirming. Because one thing is, you don't want to take the time to go to these NA or AA meetings, whether it be electronically or in person, and that do you no favors because you have no documentation of it. Because another thing you want to do too is this documentation of these meetings. You want to make your lawyer aware. While you're on pre-sentence release, you have a probation officer. You want to make that person aware, and you want to be sending them copies of the confirmation that you actually attended these meetings. And then the confirmation that you attended these meetings, you also want to make 2 copies of. Your lawyer may ask for a copy, so that's a whole other copy. But you want to make a copy for your point of contact person to hold on to send in to whoever needs it, in the prison when the time comes. And a copy that you send in maybe the day you're on your way to prison, stop at a post office, to yourself in prison. So you'll get it a few days later to give the RDAP people. Another thing about the RDAP program is it's not simply a 9-month program in-house, and then you get the year off your sentence and 6 months extra halfway house time. There's also expectations that when you get out of the halfway house, that while you're at the halfway house and when you get out, that you continue treatment of some sort. Now, for most people, what this equates to is while you're in the halfway house, there's going to probably be in-house AA or NA meetings. There will be therapists, not nice, cushy, soft couch, I care about you therapist, but kind of tell me your business because you have no privacy therapist. But you want to you'll probably be required to do some amount of therapy or NA or AA in the halfway house. And then when you get out of the halfway house and you home plan to your family, to your place, to the homeless shelter, to wherever, you'll probably be required to do additional. Now, mind you, you're going to be on paper. Usually people coming home from the Fed are on 3 to 5 years of paper of federal probation of supervised release. You're only going to be required to continue to do this drug stuff for like 6 months, I think it is, into your release. Now, I know me personally, my plea deal says up to a year of supervised release of federal probation after prison. Generally, if you have 3 or 5 years, at about the halfway mark, you can ask to get off early. It's going to be denied, but then just every 6 months, keep filing and asking, and make sure you're doing everything you're supposed to. Actually, go above and beyond if you can. But so this isn't something that doing the RDAP program doesn't mean that you're going to be going to NA meetings twice a week. Your entire prison sentence, your entire halfway house time, and your entire 5 years, 3 years on supervised release, and this is just your new normal. No. It means you'll do a 9-month program in-house. It would probably be just generally a good look after you do that 9-month program, if you still have a little more time before you go to the halfway house, to periodically drop in on an NA or A meeting in the facility. When you go to halfway house, you'll probably be going to meetings once or twice a week with a whole bunch of other people, doing the same thing. It isn't like you're going to stand out in any way, shape, or form and whatever. And then when you go home, depending on your work schedule and other variables, you're probably looking at a meeting or 2 a week. Possibly a meeting or 2 a week in combination with once a month or once every couple weeks some kind of substance abuse counselor. Now, another thing they're going to do too when you do RDAP is when you come home, the color line. For those of you who don't know, the color line is a phone number you call. And most of them actually have Facebook groups now. I don't know if they have Instagram and all that. They might. But I'm on the color line now in pre-sentence release. I just look at their Facebook page every morning. But the color line is usually a some type of medical facility or something just for this purpose. But the color line is a number you can call, or usually a website you can look at, that every single day, and they don't give you any heads up ahead of time. It's just per day as it comes out, you see it. The colors of the day are announced, and whatever color you have determines how often you'll be called in for random drug testing for UAs. My color is federal green. Now, I've been on pre-sentence release for a little over a month. My color hasn't been called yet. My color was called like a month and a half ago. Now, here where I live, they have federal green, federal red, and federal black. Is it black or blue? I think it actually might be blue. Yeah, I'm fed green. Fed red seems to get called seems to pop up like weekly, every 10 days. And then the Fed blue seems to come up a little less frequently than the Fed red. But definitely, federal green is a very sparsely called color. But when you get out of prison, if you've done RDAP, you get put back on the color line. You're going to be assigned a color that initially that gets called much more frequently than a person who did not do RDAP. And this is because you have a now documented, well documented substance abuse history, and so that has to be monitored. The good news about that though is, after like 30 days, because you'll probably get a color that's like called like once or twice a week, which is kind of nuts and really inconvenient, but it is what it is. Would you have rather did an extra year in prison? I mean, not me. So, but after you have so many clean your analysis, after a couple months probably, then they'll change your color to a less frequently called color. Then every couple of months they'll keep knocking you down as far as the color you have to being less and less frequently called colors until you're pretty much in the position I'm in where, maybe 30 days goes by and you just don't get called in for your analysis because, your PO doesn't feel like there's any need for that. For the most part. I mean, you even being on the color line, you even having a color and having to call the color line at this point is just a formality. It's not because there's any legitimate concern that you're out here doing any kind of drugs or anything. So, anywho, so that's the basic rundown on the RDAP program. The highlights here are this is the only program widely available in federal prisons, and it's not in all prisons. So if you get sent to a prison that doesn't have RDAP, and you qualify for RDAP, you will have to be transferred, which is such a nightmare. But I mean, we do what we got to do, right? But you have to be transferred to a prison that does have it. And if the judge recommends or your lawyer asks at your sentencing that you participate in RDAP, it's more likely that Grand Prairie, who does the designations, will put you in a prison with RDAP, which will save you a lot of headache too. So you really want to get to that. But RDAP, now if you have like a 2, maybe 3-year sentence, RDAP is only going to take 6-9 months off your sentence and only give you, a few extra months halfway house. It's not going to be as big of a reward because proportionately, if RDAP applied across the board a year off and 6 months extra halfway house, a lot of people would just be doing RDAP and going home, and that would be it. They wouldn't do any time really, or they wouldn't even have enough time to finish RDAP. So it is proportionate. I know for me, I'm looking at up to 4 years. 3 or 4 years, I'd probably get a year off for RDAP. And the additional 6 months halfway house. 3 years, they might just give me 3 months extra halfway house. The 1 or 2 years, 1 year, it just ain't even worth even bothering signing up, 2 years, right after I would go in, it would take a couple months probably at least to get into RDAP. After RDAP, I would pretty much straight from RDAP go to the halfway house. I would be in there 6 to 9 months maybe, and then I'd be home. So, versus, doing all of the time minus 54 days a year. You do the math. It's a world of difference. So, you really want to dig deep and try to figure out, if and how you are in fact a person who's applicable for RDAP. Because if you are, this will be your one opportunity to take a decent slice out of your time. And you need to be getting your documentation together, any pre-existing documentation, gather that, make sure they have that for your PSR, make sure your lawyer has that, make sure you send a copy to yourself in prison, make sure there's an extra copy in the free world. If there is no documentation of a pre-existing substance abuse issue, then start building the documentation now that's part of your life. You know what I mean? That you have some history or issue with substance abuse and that you're actively seeking assistance for it, which will make the judge more likely to recommend that as well. So this video went a little longer than I wanted to. It's probably been a little redundant. Again, I'm super tired. I've been so busy and overwhelmed. But I hope that the video was able to provide some information for y'all. If you like the video, feel free to subscribe, hit the dingy button, little bell thing if you'd like notifications. As most of you know, September 16th of this year of 2016, I'll be getting sentenced in federal court. And, I'll probably be a self-surrender, so hopefully I'll have the opportunity to make videos about, my sentencing hearing and that kind of thing, and probably even video my self-surrender. But either way, whether I get to self-surrender or not, once I'm in prison, I will not be able to make more videos. However, once I come home from prison, I will then hop right back on here and get back to it. So by hitting the dingy bell, because in 2, 3, 4 years, I'm gonna be out of sight, out of mind for you, and I'm not bothered by that. That's just typical, it's just human. But if you hit the dingy bell, then when I come home, you'll be notified that boom, Fed Phoenix is making videos again. And I think at that point, first off, I have to really be careful what I say at this point because I am on pre-sentence release. So I have to be very cautious with my words. Now, once I come home, I'm still going to have to be cautious for about a year, and I'll definitely let that be none of my videos. I'm watching my mouth because that's smart. But, and once that's over with, I'm free to say whatever I want, however I want, about whatever I want. And that's when things probably really going to start popping like fish grease. But, but definitely when I come home, I think I'll definitely be, I'm going to lose a lot of weight in there. I know that. Because ain't no way I'm going to be able to afford commissary most of the time, in order to maintain my body weight, which is going to do wonders, honestly, for my joints and stuff. I just worry about how it's going to affect my blood sugar. But, I know that when I come home, there will be a physical, metamorphosis that'll take place between weight loss. My hair's already pretty long. I know y'all, oh, it's in a bun. It's a little past short, about this long. But my hair will be a lot longer when I come home. I'll definitely have a lot less weight, probably a little more muscle mass. Not that you'll probably be able to tell with kind of the flabby skin from the weight loss. I'll definitely probably have a different outlook on prison, federal prison, on a lot of things I speak on now. And I don't know if that's going to be good or bad. I don't know if that's going to be like a good, wisdom, insightful thing or kind of I hope it's not an angry, bitter type thing. But, anyway, if you want to see the rest of the journey, the post-incarceration journey, it would be very wise to hit the dingy bell, the notification thing, because that is how you will know when I'm back on YouTube and you will become privy to that. So anyway, and in the description is all the information if you want to contact me while I'm in prison. So anywho, thank you very much for your time and have a beautiful day. And fly high, my federal phoenixes.